Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Para New Orleans, the Paranormal New Orleans podcast, where we tell stories of the scary, the spooky, the unusual, and otherworldly from across the New Orleans area and beyond. Today's tale comes from a subscriber of my YouTube channel. She emailed me quite a while ago, and I'm just getting around to sharing her story, so please forgive me for taking so long to share this tale with you all. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy. My husband and I purchased an old schoolhouse in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana. I dreamt about the place before I even met my husband. I know that sounds strange, but we're both from up north, and never would I have ever imagined living in the South, especially Louisiana. We had no known ties to the place that we were aware of. But a couple of years after we were married, he was offered a very lucrative position, and we had no choice but to take it. One day we are riding down the highway. He's driving, I'm looking out the window, taking in the scenery. Just a lot of land, crops, trees, a house every now and then, some cattle. But something about the area seemed so familiar to me. And I made that comment to my husband that I've been here before. He just looked at me and chuckled. He never gave much credence to some of the weird things I told him I'd experienced. He wasn't one of those people that believed in past lives or the supernatural. But I told him again, this place, this area, I've been here before. I've seen it. But we just went on driving to our destination. I told him we'd have to come back through and maybe stop in a couple of spots just so I could get a feel for the place. He said okay, but it turned out it would be 8 months before we returned to the area. Same scenario, we're driving down the road. And I get that feeling of familiarity. I asked him to pull over at a certain point so I could get out, put my feet on the ground, and I don't know, see what I could feel. He obliged. When I stepped out, I could smell the air, It was so recognizable. I walked a little ways away from the car, and about 30 feet ahead of me, on the opposite side of the road, there was an overgrown pasture of some kind. But I could clearly see that there was definitely a road there that had existed at one point. So I walked a little closer just to see if it would be possible to drive our vehicle through. And it looked like it was. The road wasn't too obstructed, the trees weren't too overgrown. So I went back to the car and I got in and I showed my husband where to go. He was reluctant at first, but I told him, I need you to do this for me. Something is there, something I need to see. So he turned, made his way down the little road off the highway very carefully. And as we got closer to the end, as we got deeper in, I could see through the trees, through the overgrown grass, there was a building. And I started to get excited. I'm not sure why, or I wasn't sure why at the time. My heart began beating quickly, and I felt like I was about to discover something amazing. And when we got to the end of the little road, I recognized it immediately. The building that was there, it was the schoolhouse from my dream many, many years prior. I let out a little scream, startled my husband, and I yelled, "This is the place, this is it." And he just looked at me and squinted his eyes and said, "What are you talking about?" I frantically reached for the handle of the vehicle so I could hop out. Before I closed the door behind me, I looked at him and I said, "This is the place I dreamt about. Remember, I told you about the schoolhouse. This is it." And he just shrugged. I closed the door and I ran to the front steps. The building had not been completely overtaken by the wilderness, but there were vines growing up the side of the building. There was a tree protruding through the roof. Of course, windows had been busted out. But overall, the structure was solid. I walked up the front steps. One of the doors was slightly ajar. So I decided to peek my head in, and well, it was in better condition on the inside than I thought from what I could see. Of course, there was some debris. You could tell animals had been in the building. But otherwise, I still had an awesome feeling about it. As I was getting ready to go back down the steps and back to my husband, I thought I heard someone talking. So I took a pause and listened closely. And there was something, someone, something, or I don't know, but I heard whispering, but I could not clearly hear what they were saying. I stepped back from the door and just crinkled my brow. And then I just shook it off because I said, there's all kinds of animals around here. It's probably just some birds or something. I went back down the steps, skipping like a schoolgirl who had just gotten what she wanted for Christmas, hopped back in the car and told my husband, we have to buy this place. This will be our new home. And he looked at me and said, but we just bought a place. You want to live here? You want to sink money into an old school building? Are you serious? And I told him, yes, I am. And that if he didn't want to go into it with me, that was fine. I'd had quite a bit of an inheritance from my grandmother. I'd also had some money that my father had given me as a gift some years prior. I would figure it out. Before we pulled off, I saw him glancing at one of the windows on the second floor. And I asked him what was wrong. And he just shook his head from side to side and said, nothing, let's go. So we turned around and went back out to the highway. There wasn't much discussion on the way back home, but I knew that one way or the other, I would purchase this building and I would turn it into my home because I knew I belonged there. I felt the connection. So I set about finding records, property records. Who owned it? How could I purchase it? I chose a realtor who specialized in properties in the area. It took about a month and a half, but she got back to me with the information that I needed. The schoolhouse was actually owned by the parish, so I would have to go to the city hall and speak to someone about buying it. Oh, I was so ecstatic when she gave me this information because I knew that this was going to be everything I dreamed of. I set an appointment to go and speak with someone in the property records office so that I could get all of the proper documentation. When I got there was an elderly lady behind the counter. She was very sweet. And when I told her what I was there for, She looked at me strangely, and she took a deep breath and took off her glasses and said, "Honey, are you sure this is the place that you want to buy?" And I said, "Yes, why wouldn't I? It's a beautiful place, lots of potential. It's on a great piece of land." She said, "Oh, I'm aware." She said, "My mother went to school there." She said, "But you don't know the history of the place. You're not from here. There's a reason that schoolhouse has been left abandoned. There's a reason that it has been left for the land to take over." I just looked at her and said, "I don't care what that reason is. I just want to purchase the building and the land that it's on." And she just stared at me and she said, "Honey, you might want to do some thorough research before you purchase this building." And she was getting ready to tell me something, but I cut her off. You know, people from small towns can be weird sometimes, and there's no telling why she didn't want me to buy this property. But I was determined. Before she handed over the papers I needed, she once again said, "Are you sure this is the property you want to purchase?" And I told her once again, "Yes, I'm absolutely sure." She looked at me with a serious face and said, "Good luck." Like I said, small town people are strange. They don't like change. Maybe she felt like I was going to come into their town, renovate this place, and turn it into some resort or some type of venue that would attract too much attention. Either way, I went to the next office, gave them all the information I had, explained to them that I wanted to purchase this property and turn it into my home. And without any question, I was given a price. I was told how to deliver the funds. And that was that. So over the course of the next few days, I got the funds together, brought it back, and about a week later, with the assistance of my real estate agent, I purchased the old schoolhouse. Oh my goodness. I was so happy. So happy. I was finally going to be in a space where I felt like I belonged, something that was familiar after being so far away from everything that was familiar to me. My husband was still reluctant, but he helped. Our first order of business was to get people in to help clear the land Let's make the road a little bit better, lay some gravel so it would be easier for the workers and their equipment to come in and out. On the third day of them clearing the land and assessing the building, the foreman called me. And he told me something very strange. He said that several of the workers ended up quitting on him that day. That they said they didn't feel welcome. And I asked him, "Are you not making them feel welcome?" And he said, "No, no, 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 no. It's not me. It's something here that they don't like that's making them feel unwelcomed." He said, "Listen, I'm here to do a job. You paid me to do a job and I'm going to get it done. But I'm just letting you know there's going to be delays because I have to find more workers." I told him, "No problem. Just keep in touch with me." It didn't seem like it was going to be a difficult task to get the land cleared and to start doing work on the building. But every few days, workers were quitting, saying the same thing, that something just made them feel not very welcome. Finally, after 4 months, the land was properly cleared. The gravel was laid. The building had been mostly cleared out except for the basement. And I was able to go and walk around and explore. Oh, it was so beautiful. I wish you could have seen it with your own eyes. I wasn't sure what the workers were talking about not feeling welcome, because I felt like this was home for me. I walked through the building, through all of the rooms, began designing in my mind where I was going to place what room would be my office, where our bedroom would be. We had enough space for my parents in case they needed to come and live with us. Everything was going well until the dreams started again. Except this time it wasn't pleasant dreams. They were nightmares. In the dreams, I was always standing outside of the building, and I could hear children playing, laughing. I could hear the school bell. But someone someone came up from behind, and I don't know, because I always woke up gasping for breath at that point, with an intense feeling of fear and a feeling that somebody wanted to kill me. I just brushed it off because I thought I'm working too much. I'm dedicating so much of my time to getting the schoolhouse remodeled, renovated, planning. The lies we tell ourselves when we're trying to ignore what we know to be something that we should not be doing. And I started to wonder, what was I stirring up? What was I stirring up with this old schoolhouse? And the dreams continued, same scenario, night after night after night. I'm standing in front of the schoolhouse. I can hear the children. I hear the school bell. And something very dark comes over me. And then there's the waking up, gasping for breath. I couldn't tell my husband because there was no way he would believe anything. He would have just said I was working too much and I needed to take it easy, but I knew there was more to it than that. One night, I'd fallen asleep on the sofa in the living room, and there was that dream again. Except this time, when I sat up gasping for breath, there was a man standing over me, his hands outstretched, almost as if he were choking me. And I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. He looked at me intensely, and as I began to try to scream again, he smiled. This very twisted, evil smile that made my entire body run cold. I couldn't do anything but cry at that point. And then all of a sudden, he just faded away. But I very clearly saw his face. I I knew that he was connected to the schoolhouse. I knew that I'd stirred up something terrible when I purchased the place. But I'd already sunk so much money into it. I couldn't imagine giving up now. The only thing I could do was just research and try and figure out what was going on. Who was he? What was his connection to the schoolhouse? I felt like I felt like I was going mad at that point because who do you talk to about something like this? And that's when it hit me. The elderly woman at City Hall, I could go back and talk to her and ask her some questions. Surely she would have answers for me, right? Wouldn't hurt to try. So I went to her. I asked her if she remembered me, and she said, of course. She asked how the progress was going with the renovation, and she said something very odd after I answered her. And she said, is there anything else you want to say? Maybe something you saw that you haven't told anyone about. I wasn't going to tell her anything because, first of all, weird. But then I thought, how would she know? And I just smiled awkwardly and said, no, no, no. No, there's nothing I want to say. There's nothing else. Everything's fine. She leaned on the counter and she said, the reason the schoolhouse had been abandoned, the reason why they were letting the wilderness take over, is that because some things needed to be left alone, some things needed to be forgotten, some things needed to fade into oblivion. You came here, she pointed at me. You came here and you stirred up ghosts of the past that were better left forgotten. So whatever is happening to you, oh, and I know something's happening, you deserve it. I just stared at her in disbelief and walked out of the office thinking to myself, why would she say that? What did she know? And how could I find out for myself? I started searching archives. I went to the closest library. I did online searches, everything I could possibly do to find out about this schoolhouse. And all of that. And all I found was 3 articles, none of them mentioning any type of tragedy or atrocity that may have happened at the school or on the property. And the dreams continued. The man continued to show up in the dreams as well. I was losing it. The more and more the renovation on the schoolhouse progressed, the more I felt like I was losing my mind. So I had no choice but to go directly to the property and spend some time there and just feel, to see what presented itself. So I went on my own one evening after the workers had gone for the day. We still hadn't cleaned out the basement. So I went downstairs and started exploring. There were several file cabinets and a few old school desks, but other than that, it was just moisture and darkness. I wasn't sure what I was going to find or what I was even looking for. And then one of the file cabinets rattled. Like it was getting my attention. Now, I don't scare very easily, but I almost jumped out of my skin, back up the stairs and out the front door. But I'd come there for answers, and answers I intended to find. So I just said a very audible, okay, walked over to the cabinet and opened the second drawer. It was full of papers, very, very old, and pictures. I flipped through everything, not really finding anything of significance until I got to this one photograph from 1929. It was a picture of some students standing with standing with me. I was looking at a picture of myself from 1929. I mean, I know it wasn't me, but it was me because we looked exactly alike. And I was so focused on the picture, I almost didn't feel the air stop moving. I almost didn't hear the sliding of the feet across the floor. I tucked the picture into my pocket and I slowly backed away towards the stairs, trying to keep my eye focused on the dark corners, trying to see what is coming. And then I heard a man, low and deep, starting to laugh from the furthest corner. And I heard the sliding of feet again. I couldn't compose myself any longer. I screamed and I ran up the stairs, up the hall, and straight out the front door. Before I got into my car, I turned and I looked. And standing just beyond the entrance was the man who appeared in my living room that night. And I could feel his hatred for me. I could feel his negative energy bearing down on me. I was losing my breath again. I had to hurry up and get to my car. It took every bit of strength I had to hop in and pull away. And even when I hit the highway, I could hear his evil laughter in my head. I needed to know who this was. I needed to know who that was in the picture. I needed to know who he was. The next day, I went back to the old lady at City Hall. And she looked at me and she said, "I was expecting you." I didn't say anything. I simply walked up to her with the picture in my hand. And she said, "Welcome back." I just, I broke down crying and I asked her, I said, "I dreamt about this schoolhouse so many years ago, and it gave me such a joy in the dream. I just felt so drawn to the place. So when I actually found it, when I found out it was real, I was so happy. But it has turned into my nightmare. Please help me figure out what's going on." And she pointed to the picture. And she said her name was Rosalia. She was my mother's oldest sister. She was a teacher at that school for many, many years. The children loved and adored her. She disappeared one day. My family suspected that the maintenance man had something to do with her disappearance because he always talked about how beautiful she was and how much he enjoyed watching her with the children. And my parents didn't feel too strangely about it at the time. My grandparents didn't feel too strangely about it at the time, but they had no idea that it would be something that would become such a tragedy for their family. Shortly after my aunt's disappearance, the maintenance man moved away from the town. He was never heard from again. But when I saw your face, when you walked in here that day, I was amazed and I knew exactly what you were coming in here for. I thanked her for helping me. Still very strange, though. But I knew the answer. The answer was somewhere on that property. Somewhere. She would have her answers for her family. And I could lay this haunting experience to rest. I went back to the property the next day with my husband, and while all the workers were there, And I stood in front of the building and I closed my eyes and I tried to focus in on my experience in the dream. I had to know what happened. I had to go through it and I had to finish. And everything around me got quiet. And I was transported back to that scene. Rosalia standing outside of the building, listening to the children, the school bell ringing, her waiting for them to run outside. And then that feeling of being overtaken by someone, being dragged off into the trees. I will spare you the ugly details of the experience. But just know that the maintenance man, Robert was his name, strangled Rosalia to death, left her body tucked under some fallen leaves and tree branches. He continued to come back for a couple of days and do things to her body. Eventually, he had no choice but to bury her. I know it sounds so incredibly weird, but just to prove to myself that I wasn't just having some type of fever dream or hallucination, I got a couple of the workers to follow me. And I got them to dig in a particular spot. And eventually, after digging about 3 feet down, there was some bone fragments, pieces of material from what looked to be a dress, and a pin, a heart-shaped brooch. I stopped them from digging anymore and called the sheriff, told them what we'd found. The old lady from City Hall brought in a picture to prove that the brooch was indeed for her aunt. And that was used to identify the remains. And I pieced the story together for the sheriff, and strangely enough, he never asked how I knew this. But strange things happen in Louisiana all the time. Strange things that defy explanation. Never knew what happened to the maintenance man, but we knew eventually at some point he passed away, of course. But I still wanted to dig, see if I could find something about him. Anyway, I had the land blessed. But I abandoned the schoolhouse. I couldn't see myself living there after this experience. And while my husband was incredibly upset because of the money that I'd spent, I felt it best to leave well enough alone and let the past stay in the past. Funny thing, though, this is the craziest part of it all. I eventually did find out what happened to Robert, the maintenance man. Even found a picture of him. And while he was much older, wrinkled, you could tell his life had been hard. He looked like my husband. When I saw him in my living room that night, when I saw him in the dreams, I knew he was familiar, but I never wanted to acknowledge. Now, my husband was never harmful towards me in any way, but I just thought it very odd that he'd basically murdered me in another life. Strange, I know. And I do have my moments where I look at him and I wonder, is any part of Robert in there with him? But we are still happily married to this day. If anything changes, though, I'll certainly let you know. Eventually, we did move from Louisiana. But once we buried the remains of the teacher and returned her brooch to her niece, my dreams went away. But I still think about that experience often and just how odd, strange life truly is. I appreciate you for taking the time to read my story, and I can't wait to hear it on your podcast. Well, that was certainly a strange one. Talk about the past coming back to haunt you. This has been Fat Girl Freestyle and the Paranormal New Orleans podcast. If you have a story you would like to share, email me at fatgirlfreestyle@gmail.com. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, Fat Girl Freestyle channel. And make sure you're following me across all socials at Fat Girl Freestyle. If you would like to support my content, you can share my videos, repost, share the podcast, tell your family and friends. If you're feeling extra generous, you can always send a love offering to my Venmo, which is also Fat Girl Freestyle. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And until next time, keep it strange. This has been Fat Girl Freestyle. I'll see you next time.